Spoilers! Alright, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 has been out for a weekend now, so let's talk some spoilers about the movie. And it's been a long while since I made a spoiler talk video. I feel like I should have done one for Logan and or Power Rangers, or maybe even Kong. I guess at the time I was either too lazy or busy. Probably lazy. But that is a full-fledged spoiler warning for Guardians Volume 2. If you've not seen it yet, you can watch this video, but it will break the movie for you. Unless you just don't care, in which case, alright, cool. So to kick this movie off, I love how it started out. Not just like the prologue with young-looking Kurt Russell, which again, they're really good at making older actors look young. But no, I'm talking about afterwards when the Guardians are fighting that big obelisk monster. Little Groot plugs in the audio jack, and right when the piano started, dun, 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 I was like, I love this song, Mr. Blue Sky by Electric Light Orchestra. In the background, the Guardians are just having the worst time fighting this thing. And it doesn't even matter because Baby Groot's just having himself a grand old time. I'm not gonna lie, I wanted to get up and dance along with him, you know, sun is shining in the sky. The song is actually a family song with me. Whenever that song would come on the radio in the car, my brother, my dad, and I, we would all sing along. Right there, this scene set a great vibe for the movie. So yeah, the Guardians beat the monster, they're talking with the Sovereign, which again, I still don't care about them. They're talking about how perfect they are, like each child is designed from birth. I was like, who asked you? However, I did find it pretty funny when the whole Sovereign fleet is chasing after the Guardians. They're being controlled remotely, and I love it. There was that one dude who was controlling it, and a crowd of Sovereign people were behind him. You know, it's supposed to be like a person playing an arcade game from the 80s and a crowd of people watching. It even had those 8-bit sound effects that, ow, ow, ow. I just cracked up at that. I thought it was genius. So to get away from the Sovereign, the Guardians have to go through this quantum asteroid field, and they have to go through these jumps, which I guess is Marvel's version of like hyperspace or warp, because you can't go to light speed because that would be exactly like Star Wars or Star Trek. You gotta do something different. So I guess they have these space portals, and you can go zoom, zoom, zoom through all these portals and end up where you need to go. Although there was that one part where Ego's ship is going through, it looks like warp. It looks like warp from Star Trek Beyond. Seriously, like right when that shot came on, I was like, that is exactly out of Star Trek Beyond. So who knows how space travel works in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. One big aspect of this movie I really liked, like I said, is Nebula. And she's telling stories about how she grew up with Thanos treating her like shit. I guess when she was a kid, she would fight with Gamora, and every time she lost, which was every time, Thanos would replace a different part of her with a piece of machinery. I was like, ugh. That sucks. Worst childhood ever. She's talking with Gamora. She's like, yeah, Thanos ripped my eye from my head, my brain from my skull, my arm from my body. I was like, Jesus Christ, if anyone is entitled to kill Thanos, it is you, Nebula. And that's where she goes at the very end of the movie when everything is done. She's talking with Gamora again. She's like, I'm gonna make things right by killing Thanos. My brother read the Infinity Gauntlet comic, which is the comic that the Infinity War movie is supposedly based off of, and apparently Nebula has a really big part in that comic at the end. I'm not gonna spoil what it is, but I guess it's pretty monumental. So if it holds true to that, then Nebula is going to have a pretty big role later on in these movies, and this movie really planted the seeds for that, so props to that. Another big chunk of the story in this film is that whole subplot with Yondu and Rocket and Little Groot and the Ravagers. And yeah, I still don't really care for the Ravagers or Taserface, who I did not think was funny at all, but it did give us some really good character development with Yondu and Rocket. My favorite line in the movie is where Yondu is like, so are you a professional asshole or what? And Rocket responds, yeah, I'm pretty much a pro. I was like, that is a perfect Rocket line. Cause he is. Rocket's a douchebag in this movie. Sometimes he's a douchebag to Star-Lord, sometimes he's a douchebag to the bad guys, but yeah, he's an asshole. Fucking lovable asshole. So yeah, they're hanging out in the jail cell, and all the Ravagers are just beating the shit out of Baby Groot, kicking him around, putting the little outfit on him. This was the moment in the movie where I was like, Baby Groot is just adorable, is when he's just walking really slowly, kind of sloshing around. But he wants to help Rocket and Yondu escape, and so he's bringing them all these different objects. Yondu's like, okay, the drawer I need you to find has this symbol on it. He gives them a Ravager insignia, and Groot just kind of holds it over his head like this. I was like, Baby Groot. I love that moment. And so yeah, with the help of Kraglin, we have a pretty sweet jailbreak scene. Yondu's whistling his arrow all over the place, and it's going, come a little bit closer now. And they get to the main control room, and Rocket gets his guns. They're like, yeah, they're shooting and they're cheering. Classic Guardians of the Galaxy comedy vibe. Love it. Meanwhile, Star-Lord and Gamora and Drax are all hanging out with Ego on his own planet with Mantis. And I'll get to Ego in a minute, but first I want to touch on the whole Star-Lord and Gamora romance unspoken thing. Because there's a point where they were dancing and Star-Lord was like, oh yeah, this is just like Cheers with Sam and Diane. I was like, oh, he made a Cheers reference. That's awesome. For those of you who don't know, Cheers is an 80s sitcom about a bar in Boston, and I love it. It's my favorite sitcom of all time. Big fan. Big fan. I'm gonna leave this on for the rest of the video. Fuck it. But yeah, holy shit, Ego is the villain of the movie. And he's a great villain. He's probably the best villain in a Marvel movie since Ultron. Because I've always said the best villains in movies are the ones that have personal ties to the hero. Ego being Star-Lord's biological father, I'd say that's a pretty strong tie. And he's a Celestial. Like, he's like a god. He's one of those dudes. Right when he said that, I was like, oh, this is beyond Thanos. This is like origin of the universe type shit. Thanos may be a mad titan, but Ego's a god. We're gonna kill a Celestial? Huh. Good luck. And he's going on about his backstory and his plan, and I planted thousands of seeds on thousands of planets with thousands of species, waiting for a spawn that would have the same celestial gene as me so we can just take over the universe together. Because I guess he found human life disappointing. He pretty much became power hungry, that's what happened. And I guess the only spawn he ever created to have the celestial gene was Peter Quill of the human race. But he actually started falling in love with Meredith Quill, and I guess that distracted him from his true purpose, so he deliberately planted a brain tumor in her. He killed Star-Lord's mother. Right when that was revealed, I was like, and Peter Quill was like, yeah, I ain't having that. And they get into a big old fight, and now we have the final climactic fight of the movie. Which is cool, you know, since Star-Lord is part celestial, he has powers of his own. So he starts flying around and turning his fist into like a big rock fist, like the Thing from Fantastic Four, and just starts wailing away on him. And the Sovereign comes out of nowhere, which I don't really think needed to happen, but I guess it gave everyone else something to do while Star-Lord is fighting Ego. But Baby Groot needs to plant the bomb on Ego's brain core thing, and that's another really cute moment from Baby Groot, is when he's in that little tunnel and it's concaving around him. He starts getting kind of crunched up. You see a tear come from his eye. He starts crying. I was like, no, don't cry, Baby Groot. But the Guardians do end up winning, and they get out of there. The planet blows up, and it looks like Peter Quill is going to sacrifice himself. He's going to stay behind. But then Yondu comes out of nowhere, saves his ass, and Yondu is the one who ends up making the sacrifice. The one act of redemption a la Darth Vader. He tells Star-Lord, Ego might have been your father, but he wasn't your daddy. And I was like, oh, Yondu was Star-Lord's dad. You know, he's the one who raised him since he was a kid, and now he's gonna sacrifice his own life so Star-Lord could live to see another day. I mean, that is solid right there, man. So the movie ends with Yondu's big Ravager funeral, and he's being incinerated in like the Skittles incinerator. That thing is like the most colorful incinerator I've ever seen. And all the Ravager ships show up, they start doing fireworks. We see Sylvester Stallone, he's like, you see Ving Rhames for a second, I was like, wow, what's Ving Rhames doing here? I kind of wish the movie would go on from there because it didn't really set up for anything else. Like, it didn't set up for Infinity War or even Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 or anything like that. It just was like, Yondu's funeral, and alright, I guess. But then we have like 5 post-credit scenes to talk about, and I'm not gonna like analyze all of them. You know, crackling with the arrow is just a little funny bit. The one with Stan Lee is like, okay, cool, the theory about him being a Watcher could be correct if you want it to be. You know, like he's this super being that has been actually all of these roles in all of his cameos. He's talking about being a FedEx agent, which you saw in Civil War. I did like the post-credit scene with Teen Groot. I was hoping we would get a post-credit scene with Groot growing back to his bigger state. And I love it. Groot's playing that little video game. Star-Lord's like, can you just clean up your room? And Groot's all like, I am Groot. That was funny. There's one where Sylvester Stallone goes to his old team. He's like, yeah, let's start stealing shit again. I don't know if this is like the original Guardians of the Galaxy from like the 70s or whenever they were created, or it's like the original Ravagers from the comics, or characters taken from a few different places. I'm not sure, but they're most likely gonna pop up again in Guardians Volume 3. Along with the biggest reveal here, Adam Warlock. The only thing the Sovereign is really useful for in this movie. Aisha is like, I will create this thing and it will destroy the Guardians and I shall call him. And right before she said it, I was like, Adam? Adam. I was like, yeah, they're finally doing Adam Warlock. It's about damn time. Although the guys at Marvel have been constantly saying that Adam Warlock is not going to be in Infinity War. And again, in the Infinity Gauntlet comic book, he has a pretty damn big part. So I don't know how that's gonna work. We know for sure that Adam Warlock is gonna pop up in Guardians Volume 3. Maybe as the villain or something? I don't know. But in the end, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is certainly an enjoyable movie. I've watched it a few times because it's an MCU movie. It's not the best Marvel movie ever, but it's certainly not the worst. I'm looking forward to seeing what Adam Warlock does. I'm looking forward to seeing where Nebula goes. I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of Groot we'll get in the next movie. Marvel movies always give us so much to look forward to. So are you ready for my question? What was your favorite Baby Groot moment in Guardians Volume 2? Whatever it is, go ahead and leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe. I'm Mary Poppins, y'all!